Comrade, how
Hello,
are you?
I'm very well. I'm prospering. I've got a bushy beard, as you see, which is
I see it. It
part
suits
of
you.
the new Ian. Sorry?
It suits you.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say so.
So you've not been at the Commons long. Are you missing it?
I'm not missing it. The prospect of being there just at the moment, I think, would be pretty horrific because I
Yeah.
think that some of the very positive aspects of being in Parliament, things like camaraderie, mixing with colleagues, discussing issues closely, what's happening, all those things will be very difficult to do uh, in present circumstances. So some of the positives will have gone and a lot of the negatives are still there. It's a very
Okay.
demanding time for an MP. I imagine from constituents, there'll be lots of important questions and lots of pressures to be doing things which will be very difficult for MPs to deliver. So for all those reasons, I think it would be difficult. Um, I guess I'm very interested in Labour's new team because I'm, a Labour animal, and I think a new era has begun. And I think if there's one aspect I am sort of slightly missing, it's the development of Labour's new team and how that's going to pan out in the future. But generally, I'm really enjoying not being in the Commons, having time to do the things that I really want to do and to pursue. And some of the work that I did in the last Parliament, I'm continuing to work on now.
I think a lot of people, what you said earlier on is absolutely true, and a lot of people underestimate the importance of that camaraderie and the social aspect. And it's not always about going for a drink with people. It's about networking and learning from other colleagues about their experiences with constituents, for example, because that will almost always be mirrored in your own experience, and you can discuss with colleagues about how to handle different situations. That's really important, and that's the value. You're right. That is the value of the kind of gathering in one place, and they've lost that now. I mean, of course, I've been out for 5 years. You've only been out for a few months. What do you miss most about it?
I think it's what you've been describing, the discussion. It's a very intense place, and you have quite intense relationships with people. You get to know people very well because you spend an awful lot of time with other people. It's a bit like going, for me personally, like going to university, where you spend a lot of time with people, spending time discussing discussing important subjects for a long time, and you get to know people quite well. So that aspect I miss. I think that the bit that I found very frustrating in the last period in Parliament was not having sufficient time to think and to delve into to issues as much as I would like to, and that's what I'm enjoying about what I'm doing now, that I can actually research matters and spend more time thinking longer term, which I think it has been lost in Parliament. The advent of social media and so on has meant there's a much more reactive, I think, approach to politics now than there was even when we first went into Parliament in 2001.
You put me in a bad light, because I was going to say the things I miss most about the Commons is the tea room.
Yeah.
And also karaoke, Ian.
Karaoke.
I mean,
Yeah.
did that finish? Did that finish when I left? I mean, you guys
No,
still do it?
It didn't finish when you left, although you're sadly missed, and your contributions were memorable, if I can put it
I'd like to think so.
in terms. The tea room, I was always a great tea room occupant and a great believer in the importance of operating the tea room. Not a view shared by either Tony Blair or Gordon Brown or Ed Miliband or even Jeremy Corbyn, although he did appear slightly more often than the other three. I think that Keir Starmer is someone who's more often in the tea room from a Labour point of view. But I think the camaraderie in that tea room is really important, and yeah, I do miss that. And I was great. I was a breakfast attender in the tea room as
Yeah,
well
same here.
every day, and there's some real political wisdom in that tea room that I benefited from hugely.
Yeah. Um, it, when I left, our circumstances leaving the Commons were different. Obviously, you chose to stand down in 2019. In my situation, of course, as a Scottish MP, I was encouraged by my former constituents to pursue alternative employment opportunities. That wasn't entirely my decision. So I found myself in a position, and of course I knew I was going to lose, so I started planning ahead of the general election. But I made a decision to go into public affairs, to set up my own company, and then I developed this relationship with Cogitamus and Mark. And now you've jumped on board as well. I have to say, at my suggestion, I was the one that suggested you'd be the ideal candidate to help us on all things Welsh. Is public affairs something you wanted to do?
I hadn't envisaged doing it before I had the conversation with you, because me being older than you, Tom, and
Slightly.
leaving a few years after you, I was at a kind of different stage in my parliamentary career. I um, wanted to continue to do things that I was interested in politics, but I didn't really have a clear idea of what that would be. One of the areas I'm particularly interested in is infrastructure, both transport infrastructure, but also, um, particularly through my membership of the uh, Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, digital infrastructure. And I've been interested in taking those forward after I'd left Parliament, but I didn't really know how I would do that. So the main thing I was focused on initially after the general election in December was a bit of a break,
Yeah.
and I just about sort of got my mind out of the bit of a break attitude when you spoke to me. So I
Yeah.
was really I was keen to get involved, because we were talking about one of the areas that I've always been interested in,
Yeah.
and I thought it was a really interesting opportunity to choose to do one of work in one of the areas that I had a keen interest in.
Well, I mean, Cogitamus, there's lots of people on board who have been there longer than I have, and they have a huge breadth of experience, and they don't just look at transport issues, but of course that is an area that I'm interested in as well. And I wanted to ask you about the new Labour shadow transport team headed by Jim McMahon. Now, I don't know Jim, but I still keep in touch with a lot of people in the parliamentary party. He is very highly thought of. I remember when he became the candidate in the by-election to replace Michael Meacher back in 2015. Even at that point, there was a lot of people whose views I respect, saying, this is a guy to watch. He's very sound politically. He is experienced. He's got a very experienced local government figure. How did you find him in the Commons?
Very effective, very pragmatic, uh, but very hardworking too. And he bore all the hallmarks of someone who's used to running things in local
Yeah,
governments. And almost immediately, he seemed to be effective in getting things done. And he appeared very comfortable very quickly in Parliament. His local government background is, I think, a very significant part of his political makeup. And I think in present circumstances, given the fact that we're talking, I think across all political parties at the moment about regional development, regional transport development, uh, that's a very significant aspect that he will be able to bring to the brief, which will be very relevant to I think the way that transport will develop over the next few years. So,
yeah,
so I think that that's really significant and is a big part of the reason he has the job. Um, I think it's also very significant that he's from the Greater Manchester conurbation.
yeah,
There's a strong party influence from the likes of Andy Burnham in Manchester, Steve Rotherham in Merseyside, and across the Pennines, Dan Jarvis in local government and also in Parliament, of course, as the Sheffield area mayor. So that's a big, important group of Labour politicians who will be very interested in development and policy development affecting the North, which
Yeah,
of course is a big political battleground and issue at the moment. So I think it's a shrewd appointment by Keir Starmer, and I think the people within the transport industry, the policy industry, or policy area generally, will find Jim a very easy person to work with, but
yeah,
also someone who will ask them the right questions.
absolutely. Now, as someone who's interested in the railways, as you know, I'm on the government's railways review at the moment. One day it will produce its final report. Goodness knows when, sometime after the lockdown.
Mm.
So I'm obviously interested in who takes over as shadow railways minister, a post that I held in government. And the person who's been appointed by Keir Starmer is Tan Desi.
Yes, Slough.
I don't know him.
Yeah.
You will have worked with him. Tell us about him.
I know Tan from the Tribune Group in Parliament, and he's a
I
very
always knew you were a dangerous lefty, Ian.
indeed. We were the moderates, Tom, but I know you're somewhere over in Australia or somewhere. I don't know,
Oh,
but
goodness knows where now. Yeah.
indeed, Tan is very very personable, very good to work with, and very effective. I think he'll go a long way. It'll be interesting to have someone from the south in the role, which will
Where's his seat?
Slough.
Of course, yeah.
So there's a bit of balance there in regional terms. I think that it will be an important aspect uh, of his brief that he's close to Heathrow. I
Yeah.
think that Mike Kane, who is another member of the transport
Hmm.
team,
I know, I
it,
know vaguely because there
Mike
are
is.
times in Parliament
Well,
overlap.
I've worked with Mike quite closely because I've done a fair amount of work relating to Manchester Airport, which
Yeah,
is effectively Wrexham's or North Wales' major airport. Although we do
of
have
course.
Liverpool Airport slightly closer, but we use Manchester a lot. So I've done quite a few visits to Manchester Airport, and Mike Kane has always been interested because they're in his constituency. So
Right.
he has a detailed knowledge of aviation through Manchester Airport. We have Tan from Slough, very close to Heathrow. Kerry McCarthy's also got a green aspect to aviation policy, and she's within the team too. So
I was glad to see Kerry being appointed to the team. Kerry's great. I love Kerry.
mm,
She and I, well, I knew her very well during the. Well, she came in 2005, I think.
2005, I think that's right. Yeah.
So I've known her a long time, and we weren't always in agreement on every green issue, but she is very, very good. She knows her stuff. I think we needed someone with a bit more parliamentary experience and policy experience in that team, and I think she provides quite a lot of ballast.
Yeah, one of the interesting things broadly about the appointments that have been made, I think, is that um, most of the appointments are from Keir's generation. There's quite a lot of
Yeah,
people. You think of people like Angela Eagle, Yvette Cooper, um, are not within the team, and the kind of more experienced generation has largely stayed either on the back benches. Some of them have very important roles, like Hilary Benn
yeah,
in select committees. But what's interesting is that most of the appointments or the shadow cabinet roles are actually from the 2015, 2010 generation rather than before then. But I think
right.
that having the experience of someone like Kerry, he's been there since 2005, and there's one or two from as far back as our day. I think that's important, and
Yeah,
I think that will help the perhaps the some of the less experienced people who are in the key posts in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet. But I do think it isn't Ed Miliband revisited, this shadow cabinet.
No, no.
It's post Ed Miliband, and I think that it's quite a fresh team, but it's drawn from the centre of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and there's going to be a very good relationship and strong relationship between the leader and the Parliamentary Party that we haven't seen for many years now.
It's the first time since Gordon Brown that the Labour leader has had the support and the votes of a majority of his MPs.
That's true.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the whole reshuffle feels fairly confident. We'll wait and see how things develop. It's early days, but it feels very sure-footed at this stage.
I think so. Yes, I think there was a lot of thought went into it. I think Keir is a politician who thinks deeply and plans strategically in his approach, and that's come through in his appointments. I think he was closely involved, not just in the shadow cabinet appointments, but also in those individual junior shadow cabinet shadow ministerial appointments. So I think that there'll be a much more disciplined approach, a coherent approach, I hope, coming from the Labour front bench than there has been previously.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, look, we haven't even met physically since you joined the Cogitamus team, and there'll be some little time before we're allowed out of our houses, and certainly before we're allowed to travel cross borders to Wales or London or wherever. So it'll be great to meet up again. We'll have to have a pint, we'll have to have a drink, maybe even karaoke.
Maybe karaoke, yes. You know my favourites, but they won't be.
I know your standards, yes. Right, listen, take care and keep safe, and we'll see you very soon.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Great to speak to you.